Hello everybody, it's Siobhan again from At One Wellbeing. The topic that we're going to cover today in the presentation and webinar is around developing more positive thinking, because the impact that negative thinking can have on our feelings and our emotions and our behaviours can sometimes lead us to think, that things are not that good in life and that things are quite negative in life. So what I want to talk to you today is really around some negative automatic thinking styles. What you can do to begin to think more positively. Look at the impact that that has on your behavior, on your feelings and your emotions. And when you're thinking more positively, certainly life feels a lot better. So when you think about it, if your mind is a garden and your thoughts are the seeds, well, you can grow flowers or you can grow weeds. So I just thought that was an amazing little demonstration of the impact and power that your thinking can have over your feelings and your behaviors. So do you want to grow flowers or do you want to grow weeds? So today's presentation is all about helping you to find ways to think more positively. Okay, so what we're going to look at today is how you can start to recognize your negative automatic thinking styles, right? So we think all day, every day. How many thoughts do you have a day? And if those thoughts are negative for most of the time, what impact is that having on your life? And then think about how it affects our feelings and our behaviors and our emotions. And then the most important thing is to start to find ways to actually change this. And the good news is that with tips and techniques that I'm going to cover today, and with a wee bit of information around your thinking styles, well, then you can start to really focus in on how you develop a more positive way of thinking. So let's go. So recognizing our negative thinking styles. I actually never knew that there was such a thing as a thinking style until I reached the ripe old age of 40. And I had always wondered why I was driving up the motorway to Belfast every day in an absolute ball of negativity and fear and anxiety about things that might happen during the day. And I was clutching the steering wheel like a demon going up that motorway, and the steam was rising out of my ears and everything, because I was thinking about things that might happen. And guess what? When I pulled into the office, those things did not happen. So I actually never thought that that was a thinking style. And it definitely became very clear to me when I was doing a program with the mental health charity Aware that that was a thinking style called catastrophizing. I was making big things out of nothing. And do you know what? Even the recognition that when I get into the office and all those conversations that I was going to have and the things that I was going to say and, what people were going to say to me, when they didn't happen, it actually didn't even stop me from driving back down the motorway and doing exactly the same thing. And what that did was make my life absolutely miserable. When I was driving up and down to Belfast to work, that was 2.5 hours every day. And that's quite a long time to be, beating yourself up because of your thinking style. So what I want to go through today is 10 of the most common negative automatic thinking styles. I'll go through them in a wee tiny bit of detail, but you can always go back and forth on this presentation and look at them and try to identify which is your predominant thinking style. Because once you start to understand what your predominant thinking style is, well then you can start to make changes. And those changes will be very, very helpful to you. So all or nothing thinking. Well, we all know what all or nothing is. It's pure black and white. You just see yourself as A or B, and it really doesn't actually matter if you can't think of yourself as being anything different. You will always see yourself as a total failure. Another thinking style is overgeneralization. So you see a single negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. So one thing happens and you think it just is on and on and on and on. Then we have the mental filter. So you pick out a negative defeat and dwell on it exclusively so that your vision of reality becomes darkened like a drop of ink that colors a beaker of water. So if you apply a mental filter to your life and you think of everything as a negative defeat, well, what impact is that having on you as a human being? And then you can disqualify the positive. You dismiss every positive experience by insisting that they don't count for some reason or another. And in this way, you can maintain the negative belief that is contradicted by your everyday experiences. So if somebody says, Siobhan, you're looking well today, and you're disqualifying all the positive, you're like, aye, right, looking well today. You're only saying that for some reason or another. And if I go through life applying that disqualification of the positive, you know, it is just leading me to feel miserable. And you know what, if you're persistently feeling low and you have low mood, actually understanding how your thinking can affect that is a very powerful tool to helping you to, you know, raise your mood and feel a bit happier. So then jumping to conclusions, anybody here ever jump to conclusions? I'll give you a really good example. I was walking down Broad Street in Magherafelt. If anybody knows Magherafelt, they'll know it's called Broad Street because it is a broad street. So I'm walking up past the off license and see my cousin coming out from the opticians across the street, and I start to wave at her and shout over her. And I know there was traffic noise and all of that, but she looked straight at me and I was like, oh my God, she looked at me and she didn't even wave back. So here I am jumping to all sorts of conclusions, going, oh my God, I must have said something, or she must have stopped thinking that I said something about her, and all of this stuff. And I went home and I was mulling over it. I was thinking, my God, what has happened there? I was like, no, she has fell out with me. She definitely has. So I thought, I'll drop her a wee message on Facebook. So I sent her a message and says, here, I saw you walking up Broad Street earlier on. I was wagging at you like a demon. I says, and you ignored me. Did I do something? And she went, oh, she says, I was coming out of the opticians. I had just left my glasses in. She says, I actually didn't even see you. So here I had jumped to this miraculous conclusion all on my own, making up big stories in my head. And it actually was based on nothing at all. And when she said she'd be coming out with it, I was like, yes, of course she was coming out of the optician. But here I was, and you know, making up the stories just to suit my own narrative. So if we jump to conclusions, we can mind read, we can fortune tell, and sometimes I'm a great fortune teller, and I'm looking into the future going like, what's going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. And you know what, it serves no purpose, only sometimes to make me feel really miserable. Magnification and catastrophizing or minimization, that's the one I was talking about. So you exaggerate the importance of things, such as things that you mess up, or it's always somebody else's achievement, or you shrink things away because you had nothing to do with any of this stuff. And you know what, sometimes I minimize my own contribution to things as well. And I minimize my own, you know, even the jobs that I've got, it was like, oh, I'm just really, really lucky. Nothing to do with the fact of the skills and experience that I've brought to each of those jobs. It's like, oh no, because, you know, I just was in the right place at the right time. So, you know, if you are doing that to yourself and you're minimizing all your great achievements, or you're catastrophizing and magnifying all of the negative things, well, that definitely has an impact upon how you feel and about your day-to-day life. And then your kind of emotional reasoning, sometimes you assume that your negative emotions are necessarily reflect the way that things really are. I feel it, so therefore it must be true. So if you continue to emotionally reason with yourself around all of the negative emotions that you feel, well, what impact does that have, again, on your feelings of positivity, on your feelings of positive mental health, on your feelings of well-being? So as we go through these, I am sure that you're starting to really identify some of the ways that you think yourself, and some of the ways that, you know, you're talking to yourself, because our thoughts can become the language that we use. And when we are talking and feeling negatively about ourselves and thinking negatively all the time, well, that certainly can affect how you're feeling day in and day out. And does any of you use these should statements or must statements or I wish I had done statements? Do you know what? You try and motivate yourself with the should and should nots. I should go out for a walk today. I shouldn't have that packet of crisps. You know, and I must do this, and I should have, and I ought to. They're great offenders. And the emotional consequences, guilt, because I think I have said about the way I talk to myself about doing more walking and about going out for a walk. And oh my God, you didn't do it. You should have done it, and I wish you had done it, and why didn't you do it? So it leads to kind of like, you know, frustration and sometimes anger and resentment. Because if you keep saying that you should do, or you shouldn't do, or you must do, or you ought to, or I wish you hadn't of, and things like that, well, do you know what? That continuous dialogue with yourself, using those words and framing your thinking in that style, can really make you feel quite bad. And your negative thinking can just continue on and on and on, and you can find no way of actually making a change to it. And then you can label or mislabel things. So I'm a loser, right? If you ever says I'm not good enough, I can't do, So you attach all these negative labels, not only to yourself, but to other people. So mislabeling involves describing an event in language that is colorful and emotive. And labeling yourself is an over form of generalization. You attach these labels, and you know what? That really affects how you feel about yourself, because if you're labeling yourself as something that's not positive, or that you're not good enough, or that you're a loser, or you're lazy, or whatever way it is that you label yourself, can again have a detrimental impact on how you feel. It can affect your emotions, and it can affect your behavior as well. So then the personalization one is you see yourself as a cause of some negative external event, which in fact you are not responsible for. So you can actually attach all of the stuff that's going on around you that's, you know, that you don't cause, and you take that so personally, and the way you think about it is like, oh my God, that's my fault. And with that word fault comes negative feelings about yourself, because none of us want to feel guilt. And if you continue to think that things are all your fault all the time, well, that's absolutely a negative way to think. So when you look through those 10 negative thinking styles, is there one or two that you can see yourself using day in and day out? And sometimes these thinking styles are so automatic that we don't recognize them at all. So even by sharing this type of thing with you, you know, by understanding and recognizing and being able to put a name to your thinking style actually gives you much more control over it. Because I know as well as there's a head in my body, that had I never have heard of the term catastrophizing, I would never, ever have been able to change it. And that's really important to know, and to be able to name how you think. You know, put a name to how you think, because then it takes the whole mystery out of it. You can say, well, I catastrophize, I minimize, I label, I use should statements all the time. And these thinking styles are automatic. And you know what? It's like driving an automatic car. You don't even need to change the gears. And sometimes that's comforting, but then other times you think, right, okay, there's sometimes a gear shift is so incredibly important. So that's the negative automatic thinking styles. So now that you know, let's talk about how these things affect our feelings, our emotions, and our behaviors. Because I know from my own personal perspective, how I think about things definitely affects how I feel. It definitely affects how I am emotionally, and it definitely affects my behavior. So in the next slide, we're going to just look at how these things are interrelated. So say, for example, I use one of my cousin walking up Broad Street, and here I am, the situation, something happens. So I'm waving at her and she doesn't wave back. So I think about, oh my God, what have I done? So I'm interpreting that situation. And the key word here is interpreting. I'm putting an interpretation onto that situation. So what emotion do I feel as a result of that interpretation? I feel like, oh my God, like nearly embarrassed about what have I done or what have I said? And then the behavior is actually making home, sitting down and mulling over it and going, what could I have said to her that she wouldn't be speaking to me? So, you know, the situation, something happens, you interpret that in your own head, then how it makes you feel and the emotions that are caused as a result of this, and then what is your behavior. And I'll give you one more example. I talked about my catastrophizing phase in my life. So the situation is I'm driving to work. So I'm thinking about all of the things that are going to happen at work that day. And I'm putting my own very dull and dark interpretation on things that happen. You know, like I'm going to go in and Tom's going to say this, and then I'm going to say that, and then I blah, blah, blah. And then emotionally, I feel like really, really tense. And nearly sometimes, if I be honest with myself, nearly a bit frightened and tearful driving into work. And those feelings of anxiety and my behavior and you know, how it makes me feel is like I am, you know, like high energy, you know, like that rush. I'm running up the stairs into the office, wondering what's going to happen, only to find out none of it did. So I hope you understand then how the situation, something happens, how the thought is your interpretation of that situation, how that can cause emotions and feelings that can occur as a result of the thought, and then the behavior is your action in response to that emotion. So then we'll give some examples, because it's always good to give examples of this stuff, because I remember the first time I ever heard about thinking styles, I was like, what? Thinking styles? No such a thing. Get your grip of yourself. only to realize that yes, absolutely, these thinking styles can have an impact on your life. So let's have a look at this one. So situation, you see a dog, think, oh my God, what a lovely dog. Isn't it beautiful? Then you go over and you go, oh, wee dog, aren't you lovely? And you bend down and you pet the wee dog. And then you feel all happy. Oh, wasn't that wee dog lovely? God, I'm glad I petted that wee dog. So you see, have the situation, you think, what a nice dog, you pet the dog and you feel happy. But then what happens now if you see the dog and you think, oh my God, that dog's going to bite me? Then you run away because you feel afraid. So we all have individual interpretations of situations and how that can affect our thoughts, how that can affect our behaviours, and how it can affect our feelings. So the same situation, but two different thinking styles around it. And here you are, two different behaviours and two different feelings. So it's just to demonstrate that the power of our own thinking and how it can impact on everything else in our lives. Look at this again. So look at the situation. Friend was late for a meeting and you couldn't reach him by phone. So your emotions, your thoughts, what if he has had an accident? Your emotions, you're worried, you're anxious. Your behaviours, you make repeated phone calls. Then there's physical sensations as well. And you might notice some of these in yourself when you're thinking about a particular thing, that you feel heart palpitations, that you're sweating, that you're nearly shaking. So you can see how the whole thing is interrelated, how your thoughts affect your emotions, your physical sensations, and your behaviours. And in actual fact, you know what? Friend was late because they fell asleep. Friend was late because they couldn't get the car started. So if you go into that automatic, oh my God, he's had an accident, you know, you could be catastrophizing a wee bit, and look at how it affects everything else. And it does affect everything else. I know it from my own personal perspective. And I'm sure you'll recognize it in yourself as well, how you think about things and how it can affect everything else that's going on around you. So then what about the changing your thinking from unhelpful to helpful? Now, isn't that amazing? So take, for example, the first one. So she ignored me going up Broad Street, so therefore I've done something, or she doesn't like me. A more helpful way of looking at that. And I have learned, you know, to actually replace the unhelpful with the helpful over time. But it does take time and it does take practice, because as I said at the very beginning, sometimes when you think negatively, you don't recognize it and you don't see the impact that it has on your emotions. But the good news is that once you start to recognize it and once you start to understand it, then you have the power to make your own helpful thinking styles much more helpful. So for example, God Almighty, yeah, she looks a wee bit wrapped up in herself. I wonder if there's something wrong. So you're not personalizing this now. You're actually saying, okay, so it's probably nothing to do with me. Maybe there's something wrong with them, or there's something going on with them. So another unhelpful feeling is emotional feeling. So you feel low, sad, and rejected. So are you concerned for the other person is a much more helpful way, right? A much more helpful way for you to say, Craigy's Almighty, maybe she's had a bad day, or maybe there's something going on in her life. And then the physical, you get stomach cramps and you feel a wee bit sick and you've got low energy. And a more helpful physical way to look at that is actually none. You feel quite comfortable. So somebody has ignored you walking down the street. An unhelpful physical way to think about that is that real, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, what have I done, what have I done? And you know that, like sometimes I get this heat that builds up and goes right up my face if I'm feeling annoyed. And if you're thinking more helpfully about that, then you feel quite comfortable with this. You feel okay with this. And so then the action with regards to this situation is you go home and you avoid them. And the more helpful way of doing that is actually get in touch and make sure they're okay. And you know what, if you do that, it takes the entire mystery out of the whole thing. Because if that person's having a bad day, and if you're also having a bad day, and you're looking to yourself for, you know, I am at fault here, I have done something wrong, they don't like me, I feel really bad, I feel really low, I feel rejected. Physically, I've got like that anxious feeling in my tummy, and you go home and you then decide, right, that's it, God, you know what, I'm going to have to avoid them from here on in. You know, once you make that phone call or get in touch with them, then you will understand that this person didn't actually see you. The key word is they apparently ignored you. And when you can start to change these thinking styles from really unhelpful into a more helpful framework, then you begin to understand the power that you have over your own thinking styles. So we do all think negatively from time to time, and I know as well as the head in my body that I can still be a bit of a catastrophizer and see that should do and have to do and you shouldn't have done. Yeah, of course that affects me. And I know my predominant thinking styles would be around those two in particular. So I find myself sometimes when I'm even sitting, you know, outside having a cup of coffee in the morning and like a bit doomy and gloomy, and I'm like, I wonder what things are going to be like this year, so or next year, and I wonder where I'll be, and I wonder who it'll be about, and I wonder what I'll be doing. So I'm projecting myself into the future, and I'm, you know, thinking of, oh yeah, and do you know what happens? I start to feel really miserable, but the beauty of the thing is, I recognize it immediately. I recognize it immediately, and one of the top techniques that I use for myself, personally speaking, is that when I feel myself getting into like that rut of negative thinking, I just get up and move. I get up from that spot and move up the stairs, pick up some washing, take it downstairs, put it in the machine. I might go out for a walk. I might go, you know, even go in and switch the television on or listen to some music. But in actual fact, for me, the powerful thing about understanding my thinking styles is that I know that the simple act of moving from that spot to somewhere else actually works for me, because it just takes that, like, that low feeling out of my day, and it gives me a sense of control as well over how I think, because I recognize, and I'm sure you recognize as well, it does affect everything. It affects my feelings, emotions, behaviors. It affects me physically. So that's what I do, but for everybody this is going to be different. So what can we do to change it? So there are some key points to help you change your thoughts, right? So if you go back, flick back to the 10 distorted thinking patterns. Know the patterns, familiarize yourself with those patterns. I know my own patterns. I would never, ever have known my own patterns only for I was told what these thinking styles were. They were described to me. And that's what I've tried to do today, is to describe to you the 10 most common negative thinking patterns. And once you understand and once you become familiar with those, well, then you begin to understand that there is such a thing as a thinking style, that all of us have particular thinking styles. And I'm not saying you just have one throughout your whole life. It changes depending on the situation and depending on where you're at in your life. But know the patterns and then recognize them. Once you know them, you can start to recognize those thought patterns and recognizing in actual fact that they may not be serving you well. Because who here wants to feel low and miserable and sad with low energy and maybe low motivation? None of us really want to feel like that. We're here to live a full and happy life. So if these thought patterns are not serving you well, recognizing them in yourself and seeing the impact that they have on you as a human being and as an individual. And that's a very strong thing that you can do for yourself, and a very positive thing that you can do for yourself. So know them and recognize them, and then challenge. So if the pattern resonates, especially in situations where you're thinking or feeling are not particularly effective, you know, challenge that thinking. Say, right, okay, I recognize now, I know what it is, I recognize it, and now I'm going to challenge it. Because if you don't challenge your negative automatic thinking, well, then it will continue to have a negative impact on your life. And remember at the start we said flowers are weeds. If we continue to let our flowers grow, or sorry, let our thoughts grow weeds, you know, our garden is going to become overwhelmed with an entanglement of weeds. Whereas if we consciously decide that in actual fact, I'm going to make my thoughts more positive because I want to see flowers in my garden. And what's more pleasant to look out at, flowers or weeds? So you know what? You might find that you're letting your negative emotions get in the way of your interpretation of the situation. You know, when you feel low, when you feel bad, when you're maybe a bit, you know, depressed or whatever way you're feeling, challenging your thinking can be a powerful tool to actually allow you to feel much more positive and to know that, you know what, I can do this. I can do this. I can challenge jumping to conclusions. I can challenge my magnification, catastrophizing. I can challenge these things because I now know what you are. I now know what you're doing to me. I now know how you're making me feel. You're affecting my behavior. You're affecting my relationships. You're affecting my confidence. You're affecting my self-esteem. And you know what? You can say to yourself and give yourself permission to say, this is the end. I am now giving you no more control. And you know what? I'm taking back my interpretation into a much more positive interpretation of a situation. So the key is to use this list just to challenge your thinking. And when, it's like I say, when I sit, you know, having my cup of coffee in the morning, I get onto that, like, right? So in any scenario, and that's my key scenario, it's a good time for you to check against the 10 patterns. And knowing what these 10 patterns are gives you the power to do that. And you know what? You know, you don't have to know this stuff off by heart. You just have to be able to recognize how your thinking's affecting you. And you just have to know that you have the power to make the change. And you know, you just have to know that in recognizing that you have that power, you can change absolutely everything. So step by step. And it's always good to have a step by step. And I have said this now in the last part of the presentation, that once you start to identify it, label it, then leave it, stand up to it, give yourself a break and look at it differently. 6 steps to change your thinking. Identify it. So that's becoming more aware of how your thinking is affecting you. Label it. Put a name to it. Oh my goodness, there you go. Catastrophizing again, Siobhan. Oh my goodness, there you're using the personalization again. And once you have given it a label, it kind of like nearly takes the power out of it. And then that gives you permission to say, right, okay, personalization, catastrophizing, should-haves, would-haves, wish-I-had-haves, I'm just leaving you right there. And I'm sure you find in recognizing how your thinking affects you that your thinking can feel a bit like a bully. Your thoughts can bully you into feeling in a particular way, and it can affect your emotions and your behavior. So stand up to it, and that's what I say. Give yourself permission today to say, today is the day that I am taking back control over my thinking, because now I know what my thinking style is. Now I know the effect that it's having on every aspect of my life, and I'm standing up to it and I'm giving myself a break from it, because you know what? I want to feel happier. I want to be happier. I want life to feel better. And also, you can look at it differently. You remember the one about the dog and how you think about it? You know, you can look at things differently. You can take a wee stand back and say, right, okay, so if I'm thinking like that, well, you know, what would a friend of mine say if they heard me, you know, saying that about that situation? Would they challenge me? And so you give yourself permission to look at it differently. Thinking is one of the things that I feel has such an impact on our life, on how happy we feel as we go through life. And I can tell you, as I said from my own personal experience, I recognize how my thinking affects everything about me. It affects how I feel. It affects my levels of happiness. It affects how much I want to do, how much I want to see people. You know, if I'm sitting in the house thinking negatively all the time, I really don't want to see people. Sometimes negativity breeds negativity. So when I'm feeling negative, it's so much easier to remain in a negative place, and it kind of like feeds itself. Negativity feeds itself with more negativity. And the more we allow that to happen, well, naturally, the more negative we're going to feel. But then if you turned that on its head and looked at that differently and said, well, positivity also breeds positivity. Have you ever walked down the street and smiled at somebody and they smile back? You know, why wouldn't they? Have you ever listened to one of those videos online about a child laughing? You know, the giggles of a child, and then suddenly you start to laugh along, because positivity does breed positivity. And if you can do one thing for yourself, is to challenge every time that you feel negative, every time that you are thinking negatively, give yourself permission just to challenge it. Because as you begin to learn how to challenge, then your life can actually change radically. as my life changed radically when I was driving up the road and driving down the road, beating myself up and having these massive negative conversations with myself and thinking that so many bad things were going to happen during the day. The minute I recognized, sorry, not even that, the minute I heard the word catastrophizing, I was like, oh my God, a thinking style is having such an impact on my life. I was immediately able to identify it every single time it happened. Label it, oh my God, there you're catastrophizing, leave it. Put the window down in the car, hoof it out the window, stand up to it, not today, you're gone. Give myself a break saying, do you know what, Siobhan, you don't have to do this to yourself. Look at things differently. And it changed everything about my drive to and from work. And in fact, it changed my life. And I'm not being trite when I say that, because it was having such a massive impact, and I think it was having such a massive impact in my life when I finally discovered at the age of 40, this is what it is. It changed absolutely everything. And if you can feel that power within yourself that you know, today, I can change how I think about things and the radical impact that that can have on my quality of life and my mental health and well-being, how I feel about myself, how I react and interact with other people, and the general feelings of happiness that we all want to feel as we go through life. So I'll leave you with this quote. It's by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And if anybody knows about mindfulness, Jon Kabat-Zinn is a massive name in the world of mindfulness. So it is remarkable how liberating it feels to be able to see that your thoughts are just thoughts and they are not you or indeed reality. So I always say, when you look at the sky and you look at the clouds and you say, God, the sky's really grey today. Well, in actual fact, you're looking at the clouds, because beyond the clouds, the sky is still bright blue. You know, when you're on an airplane and you go up through the clouds and it's all blue and it's beautiful. So that's exactly what your thoughts are. Your thoughts are the clouds. The sky is actually reality. So I hope you found something useful in this today. I am sitting here thinking to myself, you know what, if this can have an impact on even one person today, even one person that has taken the time to listen to this right through and goes back and reflects on, you know what, I know that my thinking has been negative predominantly, and today I'm going to take charge and feel the power, feel enabled, feel confident that you can do it, because I could do it. I did it. And if I can do it, well, then anybody can. So that's us done today. I am going to stop sharing, and then I am going to stop recording. And I hope you all have an absolutely wonderfully fantastic day. Thank you very much. Bye.